You ever see one of those headlines flash across your screen? A CEO's giant multi-million dollar paycheck, and you just stop and wonder what on earth is that actually made of? Is it just a truckload of cash? Well, the truth is, it's a whole lot more complicated, and honestly, a lot more interesting than that. So let's dive in and deconstruct what's really inside a modern CEO's paycheck.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle why these pay packages are so complex to begin with. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty, breaking down the four main parts: the cash, the long-term equity, all those perks, and of course, the famous golden parachutes. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the big debate. Does this whole system even work?
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1 and get right to the heart of it. Why all the complexity? I mean, it's a perfectly logical question, right? If you're just paying someone for a job, why are these packages so intricate? Why not just write a really, really big check for a salary and call it a day?
Well, the answer is that executive pay isn't really just a payment. It's a strategic tool, and it's built to do three very specific things. First, you've got to attract the absolute best talent out there. It's a fierce market. Second, once you get them, you got to keep them. And third, and this is the real magic trick, you need to make them think and act like an owner of the company. The whole goal is to tie their personal financial success so tightly to the company's success that they only get rich when the shareholders get rich.
Okay, so let's move on to the part of the paycheck that's easiest to understand, the actual cash. This is the money an executive can pretty much count on every year.
And even this annual cash is split into two buckets. First, you've got the base salary. That's the fixed, predictable amount they take home no matter what. It's guaranteed. But then you have the bonus. This part is variable, or what's called at risk. And it's at risk because if the company doesn't hit its annual goals, say for revenue or profit, that bonus might shrink or disappear completely.
All right, now we get to the biggest and, frankly, most confusing piece of the entire puzzle: equity. This is where those mind-boggling numbers you see in the headlines really come from. And it's all designed to make executives focus not just on this year, but on the company's success way down the road.
Now, before we can even talk about the different kinds of equity, we have to understand this one crucial concept: vesting. Think of vesting as a mandatory waiting period. The company basically says, here's a ton of potential value, but you don't actually own it until you've stuck around with us for a few years. It's the ultimate retention tool. People call it golden handcuffs for a reason. An executive could get a great job offer somewhere else, but walking away could mean leaving millions of dollars of unvested equity on the table.
So, the first and most classic type of equity is the stock option. Honestly, the best way to think of this is like a coupon. The company gives you the right to buy its stock, say 3 years from now, but you get to buy it at the price it is today. That's called the strike price. If the stock price skyrockets over those 3 years, your little coupon to buy it at the old, cheap price becomes incredibly valuable. And this table just makes the math crystal clear. So let's say on day one, you get 1,000 options. The stock is trading at $1, so your strike price is locked in at $1. A few years later, the company's done great and the stock is now worth $10 a share. You get to use your options, your coupons, to buy those shares for just $1 each, even though they're worth $10. That's a $9 profit on every single share. For your 1,000 options, that's $9 grand just like that. You can see how this directly motivates an executive to drive that stock price up. Okay, so the other major form of equity is called a restricted stock unit, or RSU, and this is way simpler than an option. Instead of giving you the right to buy stock, the company is just promising you actual shares of stock. Once you've stayed for the vesting period, boom, the shares are yours. They're just transferred right into your account. You don't have to buy a thing. So when you put them side by side, the critical difference is all about risk. Stock options are a high-stakes bet. If the stock price goes down or even stays flat, they can be completely worthless. It's higher risk, but the potential reward is massive. RSUs, on the other hand, are much safer. As long as the stock is worth something, anything above zero, they have value. It's a lower risk, more conservative reward. Now, companies can get even more creative with something called synthetic equity. Things like stock appreciation rights or phantom stock. With these, the executive never actually gets any shares. Instead, they get a cash bonus that's perfectly tied to how much the stock price went up. It's a clever way to give them the same financial incentive as an owner without actually having to issue more stock. And look, this example shows you exactly how it works. You're granted 500 phantom shares when the real stock price is $60.50. 5 years go by, the stock climbs to $85.25.
The company just calculates the difference, the appreciation, multiplies it by 500, and there you go, a cash payout of over $12,000, all without a single real share changing hands.
All right, let's shift gears from cash and equity to some of the other elements in the package, the stuff that often gets the most headlines, the perks and those golden parachutes.
Perks, or prerequisites if you want to be fancy, are all those non-cash benefits. We're talking about access to the company jet, personal security, high-end club memberships, that kind of thing. But what's really important to know here is the note at the bottom. Since around 2008, thanks to a lot more public scrutiny, the use of these kinds of perks has actually dropped by about half.
And then you have the legendary golden parachute. Now, this is a very specific kind of severance. It's not what you get for doing a bad job. It's a huge, guaranteed payment that an executive gets only if they lose their job because the company gets bought out or merges with someone else.
Now, as you can imagine, these are really controversial. The argument for them is that it helps a company hire a great CEO for a job that might not exist in a year if they get bought out. It also, in theory, makes that CEO more likely to approve a good deal for shareholders instead of fighting a merger just to protect their own job. But the criticism is pretty obvious, right? It's a huge payment for leaving, it's not tied to performance, and shouldn't the CEO already be doing what's best for shareholders? That's their job.
So, that brings us to our last section, and really the biggest question of all. After looking at all of these moving parts, the salary, the bonus, the options, the perks, does this whole complicated system actually work? Academics are pretty split on this, and it really boils down to two competing theories. One is called optimal contracting. This view says, yes, it works. The market is efficient and boards are smart. They design these packages to attract and motivate the best people, and that's good for everyone. But then there's the other side, the rent extraction theory. This view says the system is broken, that powerful CEOs basically use their influence to get sweetheart deals from the board, extracting way more money than they're truly worth.
And at the end of the day, it all comes back to this simple idea. The board of directors is there to represent the owners, the shareholders. And their fundamental challenge is to figure out how to get the best possible leader for the best possible price to create the most possible value. Every single piece of that paycheck we've talked about is just a tool in that negotiation.
So that's the question we're left with. When you look at all the pieces, do you see an efficient, fine-tuned machine designed to align the interests of executives with the interests of owners? Or do you see a flawed system, one that's just kind of gotten out of control and allows for massive pay that isn't always connected to performance? That's the billion-dollar question that boards and shareholders are still debating every single day.